forget, there are, I'm kidding, hand signals. There is a clipboard back there that you may or may not have seen. If I don't have your name and email and you'd like me to notify you of things, for instance, in addition to meetings such as this, I just found out 2 days too late that a speaker I really enjoy listening to out of California was in Petoskey this weekend. And I found out just as he was on the plane going home. Alan Schleman, no stand to reason. Real good speaker. He came to an Anglican church in Petoskey and did 6 sessions in one day. So I've had words with the pastor. So this can't happen again. I've talked to him too about next time around. Maybe I'd like to at some point, if we could build enough momentum, get enough people introduced, involved enough to know what apologetics even is and have interest to get some kind of apologetics conference together. I've got speakers that have said they'd be willing to do it. So, and Alan I spoke with just yesterday, and he said he'd be on board too. So, anyway, I will email those sorts of things. If you look at the card that Vanna is holding, those are if you have ideas for topics or bad things you want to say, questions, whatever, you can put them on there. There are, yeah, I got it right here. There are lots of these too. I've got lots. So if you want to have a stack of them to hand out, stick them on your church wall, give them to people, tell them what to do, feel free. Is that everything? It's done. Yeah, that's it. So next, what I'd like to do is just go over, as Anthony said, we've talked on this topic a little bit a few times, on the topic of entertainment. When we've talked about entertainment, meta-narrative, worldview, interfacing with culture and the views that are out there, and a lot of this ties in with what he just said on postmodernism. Did you edit any of that in the last few days? Your handout? I
didn't talk about the movies, the movie list, but other than that, I didn't edit it much.
Yeah, the movie list and even the a couple of songs that are listed in his postmodernism thing are also in these videos. Thought that was interesting. So what I'm going to do is play a couple of videos by a guy named James Harleman, formerly a pastor at Mars Hill in Seattle, Washington. I'm not sure what he's doing now, except that he's got a website called Cinemagogue. Synagogue, where he looks at the intersection of culture and faith. He likes looking at the meta-narrative. What is the big story of reality according to the Christian worldview, and how does it play into what we see in entertainment, specifically movies. Very interesting reviews that he posts. He posts video and written reviews. I've got a couple of brief videos by him, and then I thought I'd just run through some points and discuss if you want or not. So I will just kick off this first one, God as a Storyteller. He calls these Film and Theology 101 and 102.
Sometimes we get questions why we do film and theology or how we approach doing what we do. And so it's my hope that in addition to the videos, movies, television, and other media we explore individually, this short series will address the basic questions, maybe deal with some of the basic objections, and ultimately lead to edification and transformation for you, as well as more glorification of the God we love as we replicate the way we engage culture together.
When I was your age, television was called books, and this is a special book. It was the book my father used to read to me when I was sick, and I used to read it to your father. And today, I'm going to read it to you.
God is a storyteller. I mean, have you ever wondered the bedtime story, the campfire tale, the oral tradition, the journal entry, the personal story, all of these things, if Billy Joel's right and we didn't start the fire, then the question is, who did? Where did this storytelling impulse come from? Why do we tell stories? And the answer is, God himself is a storyteller. Genesis 1:1 begins unfolding his narrative with those classic words, in the beginning. It's not unlike Once Upon a Time. It was a dark and stormy night, all the ways that we enter into traditional stories. And in fact, instead of happily ever after, we wind up with eternity in heaven. It's so reflective of the way that we tell stories that humans are obviously motivated to tell them because we are image bearers of God. Genesis 1 says that God created us unique amongst all creation in his image and likeness. Imago Dei is that term, the image of God. And so the root of all storytelling can be traced to this God-given impulse. I don't care if we're talking about the Song of Solomon or a scare from Stephen King. Now, some of you will object. And I'm not suggesting by saying that we always get it right. In fact, some stories indeed are distorted ramblings. Others are vertical offerings. And a handful have even been proven to be Spirit-led scripture. But all still they sprang from that Imago Dei impulse within us, no matter how distorted. And this correlates with the fact that we were created to be worshipers. And even in our rebellion against God, we still worship something. We still tell stories to something or someone or for some purpose out of that impulse, no matter what the direction has become. We're the creation reflecting our Creator in that relationship. Now, sometimes we're also revealing what we worship. The Hollywood eternal complaint is that they churn out stories to make money, that they're just a media machine, that the object of worship is money. Sometimes we might write a story or write poetry to impress a girl, to win something or someone, something to gain by the telling of that story. Sometimes it might be simply for our own fame, for our notoriety, and ultimately it's usually just to please self. So what if our creative impulse could actually be a pleasure to the God of the universe? How would that not be both the recognition of that and then that aim not be a beautiful and ultimate goal? And actually, if we sift our hearts and sift the scriptures and sift the spiritual side of life and figure that out, deep down the truth is, we know that's what it's about.
I don't even know what I'm doing here.
You believe in the users?
Yeah, sure. If I don't have a user, then who wrote me?
The book of Romans in chapter 1 tells us that what may be known about God is plain to us because God has made it plain to us. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood in what has been made so that we are without excuse. We exchange the truth of God for a lie and worship the created things rather than our Creator. We take our Imago Dei impulses, essentially, like storytelling and the enjoyment of it, and we point it in the wrong direction. How much greater would our creativity be and our consumption or engagement of creative offerings if even the simplest story brought us closer to our Creator?
Hey, Cop, don't you think we have better things to do now than tell old stories?
Like what? No! Tell story! Quiet!
Tell story!
We want to hear story!
See, even Christians often neglect story and art. We were oftentimes brought into the faith by a proposition or a prayer or a statement, and we trade our passion for systematic theology, when the truth is Jesus fundamentally was a storyteller. Jesus spoke in parables. It's why he's always talking about a farmer, or what's this crap about mustard seeds? Why is he using metaphor? Where are my bullet points? Jesus was a storyteller. Not only did he tell a story, he lived a story that is the center and sum of human reconciliation to God. And then he told his disciples to be the bearers of that story, to be orators of that greatest story to the entire world. Not only was Jesus fundamentally a storyteller in his incarnation, but while he was walking the earth 2,000 years ago, he claimed to be the very Word of God that spoke the universe into existence. God's not just a storyteller. Jesus is the living Word that snapped the screenplay into existence and now sustains that story ongoing that we're a part of by the power of his Word. And he comes again to sum it up as Savior and Lord and King, both the storyteller and the protagonist, the central character of the greatest story from beginning to end, Alpha to Omega. How much better would the greatest story be if you and I woke up each and every day excited about the part we had to play in the greatest story ever told, and humbly repenting of the fact that we ever thought we were the central character, that we ever were the protagonist, but instead looking to the true protagonist for both how to live and also for that gracious gift of reconciliation to our Creator, who made us in His image and likeness. How would that then redefine our relationship to entertainment, both as entertainers and the engagers of that entertainment, and even then give us more tools to be God's disciples, called to carry this story, to bring others into this joy? That's the heart of film and theology that we'll look at in this 10-part instructional series to complement the reviews and other things that you'll find on the Resurgence and elsewhere. You can also find out more about movies and mega-narrative at my website, Cinemagogue.com. But until next time, this is James Harleman, and remember, watch to glorify.
Anyone have any thoughts? Anything stand out? Anything interesting or new?
What was his last name?
Harleman, Harleman.
What was that first movie?
Tron, the original Tron, that no one probably saw. You said it. Oh, there you go. Excellent work. Anthony, did you? What do you have to say?
That was awesome.
Oh. You got your Tron and Transformers.
No, I like his point of view. I like the way he looks at
Yeah.
Storytelling and God.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we never think of God as a storyteller, but why shouldn't I have?
Yeah. Right.
It's painfully obvious now.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, of course, why didn't I think of that? I could have my own website.
Could be popular in tiny circles.
The first I ever started reading about the emergent church was probably almost 10 years ago. And they started with this idea that God is more than a boring set of statistics or facts or commands. He's a living, breathing story. Well, great, that intrigued me. I got thrilled with the idea. Well, it didn't take them very long to say, and by the way, we can change the story anytime we want.
Right.
And so there's the postmodernism blending with the what he's saying to create a hodgepodge soup.
Right. You know, the postmodernism in the church and the emergent, where that kind of started, there was a group that had good intentions, like you're saying. What are we doing wrong? Is the way that we're doing things creating a barrier? And could there be another way? Maybe that's fine for the churches that exist, and they're serving their people. If they still have a following in that segment, great. But is there a group that's being missed? Is there anything we can do differently to be more attractive to them? Everybody in this group was looking at that issue back in the 90s. A large portion of that group included theology in that. What could we change about theology to make it more attractive? It's a horribly different turn than the group that got panicked and left the organization. One thing that Anthony uses the word a lot, and he will as well, meta-narrative. Meta is just a step above something. When you talk about physics, physics is talking about how things work. The physics, the class in school. I should have thought this through ahead of time. Metaphysics is what is the essence of reality? What is it that is bigger than physics, that physics is a part of? When you take a picture, with a digital camera, it stores it in all these ones and zeros. That is data. It's graphical data stored as code. There's also what's called metadata attached to it. Metadata says where was it taken, what was the f-stop, what was the shutter speed, all that kind of stuff. It's information about information. So meta is, if you're thinking in outline form, meta is going up one level in an outline. What is the bigger picture? So when we talk about narrative, we have narratives, there's all these stories, and we do have, like when he's talking about in postmodernism, we do all have different stories. However, there is a meta-narrative, a story that encompasses all the stories and makes sense of them. So when he's talking about meta-narrative, you'll see him looking at what is there in a film or in a story, in something we're talking about that we can use, we can appeal to. Yeah, when Tron said that, of course I believe that these Tron, those guys with computer programs, it's going to take a lot of explanation. They're computer programs that are talking. They don't really. But so what happens is you have things when you delete one, they experience pain and confusion and turmoil. So this guy enters into the game. But the programs ask, do you believe that there's a user? Well, of course there is. How did I get written? Where did I come from? Why does anyone resonate with that? Because there's something real there. There is some sense of something bigger and being created and coming from something bigger than us. So that's the whole meta-narrative thing, and what we're getting at with all of this entertainment stuff is not to just to push movies, although that's not always a bad thing, but to say you're at the water cooler, you're sitting over a cup of coffee, and yeah, wasn't that a cool scene? What do you think they were really getting at there? Why was that so moving to everyone? We all have this universal experience of being moved by this thing. Why?
Let me give you my question, then I'll give you the background while you're thinking about the answer. My question is, why is it so hard for Christians in today's culture to tell stories that capture the cultural attention? Here's my background to it. Take Pilgrim's Progress that Bunyan wrote. It was, I think it's the second best-selling book in the history of the world after the Bible. It was hugely influential at the time. Or Ben-Hur, that was written, I don't know, 100 years ago, 150 years ago. It was a runaway bestseller in America. You have Shakespeare, who, I don't know if he was nominally Catholic or sincerely Catholic, but clearly his stories are embedded with an awful lot of the Christian worldview. So you've had these times in history where the Christian storytellers were really influential culturally. What do you think has happened that in the last, I don't know how many years, but when we think of entertainment and we think of storytellers in our society, we don't think of Christians. Why not?
It's a good question. I guess there are probably two main streams to follow if you're working in entertainment and you're a Christian. One is to be blatantly, overtly Christian, Left Behind, those kind of things, where it's clearly a Christian book by a Christian author for a Christian audience. The other is to try, and that so that you're putting that out at Christian bookstores for Christian consumption. You're not going to have a whole lot of non-Christians consuming that probably. The other way to go is to be more, just making regular, like the stuff we saw a couple meetings ago, Brian Godawa and all those kind of people who are trying to inject story with Christian significance into culture for people to carry from that point on. And I think, was your original question about the church? Why the church hasn't accepted that?
Yeah, why has there been a lack of cultural storytellers?
Yeah, I don't claim to know the full answer. I wonder if part of it is we've got this whole in it, not of it tension. And we've got on the not in it, not of it, you've got the Amish and Mennonites, the secluded, who want to be, well, some break free. You've got people who don't want anything to do with that. They feel, not that this is their motivation, all of them. Certainly there's cultural reasons and everything else. But one reaction to the in it, not of it is, I want to be completely free. I want to be a monk. I'm going to go live in a monastery. I'm going to be on a very strict schedule. I'm not going to talk. I'm going to keep myself out of trouble, and this is what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on God alone, and that's all I'm going to do. Okay, that's fine. Your reach is going to be slim. Then the other extreme is I'm going to be in it and of it, and you just get so caught up in the mainstream that there's no discernible difference between the two. I think it might be a fear of either if I go one way I'll go too far, or I don't know how to navigate that. There have certainly been a lot of giant pendulum swings, but I don't think there's been a whole lot of well-done integration.
So I think a good example of a person that doesn't, I just had a conversation with her, Meg Minker.
Okay.
She's had that conversation with Christian publishers, because she's not she's a Christian, but it's rights in the secular world, and I think it's been a huge thing for both.
Yep.
But it's a tricky situation because there's publishers that don't want anything to do with her because she's not totally Christian. So.
Yeah, and people will say that people will call you a sellout.
Yeah.
If you aren't just taking every opportunity to blatantly evangelize, you're a sellout. I remember a quote by Amy Grant years ago when before there was all this crossover. You didn't have things like Switchfoot and stuff. You're either Keith Green or you're in one camp or the other. And people would say to Amy, how come you don't give an altar call at your concerts and all this? And she said, why don't you stand on a crate at the shopping market and give an altar call? I mean, why is it I'm the only one that has to do this? Do I have to have, not an endorsement of a particular person or anything, but this is not just, somebody that tries to thread the needle and bring those together isn't necessarily a sellout.
And some people like that can be just like all of us, can be that stepping stone too.
Absolutely.
To the next step.
Yeah.
And we sort of demand that of ourselves and of each other. We compartmentalize everything.
Sure.
We don't want to be held accountable on Monday the same way we're held accountable on Sunday.
Right.
Well, if that's true of all us consumers, it's got to bleed over into the publishing and producing, and
Right.
It's very, very subtle. And we get what we want.
Christians also are very good at compartmentalizing, and I don't pretend to know why or everything goes into it. But if you think about it, we have Christian t-shirt companies, Christian bookstores, Christian publishers, Christian movie makers, Christian everything. There's Christian food. It's crazy. Not that it's a bad thing, maybe, but
Yeah.
I don't know that it's necessarily an ought either, that we ought to be that way. So,
Well, isn't it that we like to find that, comfortable place? Like, we feel like we're not going into enemy territory. We're walking into a Christian bookstore, so we feel like, well,
right.
nothing here I pick up is going to be, bad for me.
Yeah.
That kind of
So you don't have to think, you can check out.
Yeah.
That could well be. Yeah, and there's arguments for all different sides,
Yeah.
Do we want to isolate ourselves?
Well, in some sense, I mean, you have to look at the other side of that as well. Then you can say, well, then what's off limits?
Sure.
Because we do believe certain things, and we don't want to submit ourselves to certain things that may be desirous to the flesh.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to go to a place that is not going to be that. We kind of know that. So what we do when we go to Christian bookstores, we do know that when we read this, it may be very entertaining. It may have a lot of romance. It may have a lot of tragedy. It may have a lot of things, but it isn't going to have pornography.
Right. Yeah.
So,
I think you're right that's where all of these started.
Yeah.
I mean, everything started that way with that desire, absolutely. And some took a life of their own, and not that it's good or bad. It's just it's certainly understandable where it started. I don't think maybe people necessarily started intending it to be that way. It's just like we have a place where we know.
It's like listening to the radio, same thing.
Yep.
This is going to be something I can listen to that's not going to be offensive to me or my children or my mom or anybody. I can listen to this music and they may not like the style, but at least what they're saying is not going to be offensive.
Yeah. To kind of transition here with the way Harleman deals with this, I think it's interesting how he talks about storytelling as a form of worship. That it is a way not only worshiping God, showing worshiping something. What are you worshiping, and in what way? And what are the possible things you could worship? Self, fame, money, opposite sex, God. But in all of those, he's talking about this meta-narrative that exists. And that's what I think is really cool about this is, like you're saying, there's something, there's things we reject, receive, redeem. Are we going to take it and say it's fantastic? Are we going to say, no, we shouldn't do that? Or are we going to say, there is something to take from this? You won't see Christian porn. Not a good idea. Christian, there are things that can be done in a Christian way, or we can appeal to Christian elements in them. So what are those things, and how do we do that, and how do we know the difference? What I kind of hear when I listen to Harlan talk is, to paraphrase from the Bible, I guess, is that we have to take every storyline captive. Look at it and say, does this fit? How does it fit? And is this something I can use? And what he said about Jesus as being a storyteller, I thought was real good too. He didn't come and lay out, a bunch of didactic, here's hand out put the thing on the screen, hand out all the sheets, and follow along on point 3, and we're going to work through this. And that's certainly in there, but the way he did it was through story. So I'm going to play this next one here pretty quick, and then you can either stick around or take off after that. I did have some other notes on it specific to specific movies, if you're interested. One thing to think of, his tagline he ends with is "Watch to glorify." I think it's an interesting phrase to think about. How do you do that? What does that even mean?
I'd just become a Christian and I was so excited. I was excited to put all the stories I'd loved, all the fictions I'd enjoyed growing up against the story of God, the true story told by the true storyteller I knew was real now. I went up to my pastor, having just seen The Matrix, a movie so rich in metaphor. It was undeniably filled and informed by spirituality and religious ideas. And I went up to him just going off and over all the little points, and probably annoyed him, but he looked at me and he said something I'll never forget. He said, "I just watch movies for entertainment."
That's entertainment.
I was devastated. I knew how the alien felt when Ripley sucked him out the airlock. My newfound enthusiasm for a God Scripture says is imminent and everywhere was disgustingly dismissed by a professing pastor who apparently saw no value connecting his freedom in Christ with his free time. His relationship with the master storyteller apparently had no connection to the fantasies and fictions that fueled his spare time. I made it one of my life goals to relook at the word entertainment, understand what it means and how it intersects with our engagement of story and our love of the storyteller, the story of which we're all a part.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
This is my friend Webster. Say hello, man. Webster likes to help us understand things, so we're going to take a look at the word entertainment here. If we look at the idea of what it means to entertain, it means to receive into the house, to engage the attention of, to receive or admit with a view to consider and decide, to take into consideration, as in to entertain a proposal. See, we often forget what words really mean, and when we say the word entertain, it used to refer not to television and things that are now 20th and 21st century ideas of entertainment, but what entertainment used to mean was to bring somebody into your living room, to offer them hospitality, to hear from their ideas, and hopefully not in a selfish way, really listen to them and then pour back into them, to provide feedback, to have it be something that informs and transforms. Well, of course, now that we've got television and story making and stories pouring into our homes, into our minds, the question is, what does entertainment mean? Well, the definition goes on to say it can either engage or distract. Those are the two polarizing factors I want to talk about when it comes to this idea of redeeming entertainment. Now, which one do we want it to do? Think of when you bring people into your homes. The selfish thing you would do was you would bring people into your home because you had a crazy day and you wanted them to sort of distract you and divert you. And so it's all very self-centered. Whereas to engage them would be to really hear from them, to really understand them, to seek to have their lives actually inform and enrich your life. It's the same thing then when we go to a film. Either we're just using it in a mindless way. We think we're going to turn our brains off somehow. Brain turned off, me watch TV. Not that our brains are ever really turned off. The information's either absorbed consciously or subconsciously and pours back out through us. So we're either using it to divert ourselves or to actually engage the ideas, to have that entertainment be entertaining it with our minds. That's what the idea of entertainment is truly. And so when somebody tells you, I just watch movies for entertainment, maybe you need to say,
you keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Think about it for a moment. 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, whatever you eat, whatever you drink, whatever you do it all to the glory of God. Wouldn't it be awesome if that was actually possible? That the times when we were looking to be transformed by the renewing of our mind wasn't just when we were reading our Bible, that we were actually looking to the God of the universe to inform us through absolutely everything that we're doing, including enjoying the stories of our culture. So if you truly want to redeem the idea of what it means to be entertained, what entertainment is really supposed to be, you need to look at where you fall on the cultural engagement scale. And there's several levels that we go. The first level we just call no discernment. These are the people who think, oh, entertainment's mindless and I want to engage it mindlessly. They're like cultural zombies just stuffing culture into their mouths. Story, like a zombie wants brains. Almost more frustrating than people who engage with no discernment, though, are the people who engage with what we call God's law. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the laws of God, but they act out in response to a God I love, not just walking through the stories of culture, sitting there as judge, jury, and executioner of that story. That was wrong, that was wrong, that was wrong. You're counting up the bad words. You're counting up all the things that don't line up. And this is what legalists do. They're not actually looking at the story for what it's trying to say and trying to hear from it. They're just looking for every single thing they can cite as wrong based on their knowledge. But that does lead us to the third category, engaging with God in mind. These are the people who'd wear the WWJD bracelets. What would Jesus do? They're thinking, how would God interact with these characters? How would God understand the people in this story that I'm engaging? How would he think and respond to them? How would he entreat them? Let them know that he loves them? How would he interact with the characters and the turmoil and conflict that they're going through? However, it's really easy to forget as you engage with God in mind that you can also engage with God in view. The Christian knows that God is present, immanent. He's sitting in the seat next to you. If you're a Christian, his Spirit dwells in you. That you don't have to just think, what would God think? You can actually be talking to him while you're engaging a story, praying to him. Scripture says, pray without ceasing, and we often think that's just a platitude, but why not speak to him during the film? God, what would you say to this person? What would you say to this character? What would you say to someone in this circumstance and in this story? How would you reveal your love for them? Letting his Spirit inform you versus just guessing what you know in Scripture or what you know of God. Actually inviting him to inform you, fill you, give you the ideas to interact with fictional characters, which, who knows, might bear out in some real-life situations that come later, which brings us to the fifth and final way that we can engaging for God's glory. This is what Paul did in Acts 17. He went into Athens and looked at their culture and their poetry and found connecting points for his sermon to talk about how their stories actually had kernels of truth which pointed to the one true story of Jesus Christ. Can we watch every story with that in mind, that since we're all image bearers of God and God's the great storyteller, that there might be seeds within all of these stories that we could use to grow and plant ideas in others as we talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, how we enjoyed, how we entertained the film in our mind, and what gave us peace and hope and confident expectation from that story to the one true story that we know and love, that governs and guides our life.
The world is a stage is a world of entertainment.
I thank God that in his wisdom our master storyteller used a flippant pastor to light the fire of passion in me, to spur me to really check out what entertainment really means. It means so much more. And as you get to know the God of the universe, realizing that he can speak to us through all of these stories, it can just mean so much more for you as well. And I'd invite you to that. If you've been watching stories, if you've been entertaining them in a very shallow way, entertain them for all they're worth. Entertain them in ways that can grow you, edify your heart, also maybe edify your relationship with the creator of the universe, and maybe then even have him inform you of ways you can show others through story how and why you know and love him as much as you do. I'm James Harleman, and for more on this, be sure to look for my upcoming book, Cinemagogue, Reclaiming Story and Navigating Narrative for the Myths and Metaphor They Were Meant to Be. Until then, remember, watch to glorify.
I like him.
You like him?
I listen to him talk all day.
Go to YouTube, Harlemanic, Harleman IC. It's his channel. He's got only 2 of these so far, explanatory, and there's probably 10 movie reviews posted here so far. Just started going on there. But yeah, if you're interested in more of that.
I wonder, Scott, if just listening to him talk, I'm thinking of that verse, to the pure all things are pure.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if what he's talking about captures something of that idea that there are things that might, like he said, might have some swearing in it, might have situations that don't line up with the Christian ideal. But to watch or read or to listen with God in mind allows us to engage with our cultural stories in a way that keeps us, keeps those things in their right perspective and lets us have the wisdom on how to engage with others through it.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. I watched, after seeing, can't remember the guy's name, the producer that did that, God as a DJ, I think it was called Flip, but he did a full-length movie. I'm blanking on the name of that, but I watched that.
Ink.
I watched that. It's online. Actually, it's quite good. A lot of swearing. A lot. It's not for everybody, for sure. And most, many people wouldn't like that or tolerate that. I get that. But the Christian filmmaker and the low budget, the story he tells is very. It's definitely sci-fi, but he's telling a story about reality and pointing to God in it. Controversial for sure on his means. It's not something you're going to show in church, and it's not going to suit everyone, but I'm sure there are people out there that are going to see that might not see something else,
I think, like this gentleman said, you're just discerning what you're watching and because there's so much out there that can be scary.
Right.
Or not scary, but bad for whatever,
Right.
whoever.
Yeah.
So if you're weak in a certain spot,
Absolutely.
struggling, then it's not a good idea.
Much of your point, however, has been how to engage with culture,
Right.
not
Right.
how do I satisfy my Thursday evening. You're not
Absolutely.
saying go out and watch all this stuff because
No.
you have a Thursday evening.
Right.
You're saying at the water cooler, do you have a response for somebody who did watch it or not?
Right. If you have seen it or are familiar, depending on what it is, and many of these, the ones that I had in mind that I wrote some notes on, are very wide audience, widely received movies that most people who watch movies have seen. So yeah, it gives you something to say. It's not an apologetic for movies. But like you said in the first one, God is a storyteller. Why do we tell stories? I think we have, because of the Imago Dei, because we're created in His image, we have this inner desire to tell stories as well. Not that we always do it well. We fail in many ways, and that's where the discernment comes in for sure. I like what he said, and I've had a number of conversations about this, and I had never made the connection with the definition of the word entertainment that he did. That the word used to mean, and it still does in some circles, well, I'm going to entertain that offer. I'm going to take that into consideration. I don't think very many people watch a movie or listen to a song or do anything as taking it into consideration. It's more passive. I think of WALL-E at the end where all the fat people are laying in the lounge chairs, they get motored around to go and do this, I'll take you over here, watch a movie. And if you haven't seen it, that doesn't mean anything. But it's a very passive thing. We look at entertainment as amusement, as a diversion, something to just sit there and passively let it happen to us, instead of receiving it, thinking on it, and seeing what do I do with it. And those 5 points he gave on how you're going to react to that. What can you do with it that seeing it in a way that God might see it and react to it, and in a way that would point back to Him as well. I think I'll just go through just some thoughts on some movies that came to mind, just as examples of what I'm getting at, what the whole concept is. And some of these he's done reviews on, so you can see, or written reviews, so you can see more in depth. And he's certainly not the only one that does this. He's just the one that's most notable that I'm aware of. But just some examples here. Gladiator, the clip that he played, are you not entertained? That goes on, what was the gladiator asking them? What are you, he's pointing to the macabre scene that they're all taking in and saying, isn't this what you came here for? Why are you shocked now that you see the reality of it all? What does that apply to now? There are things in entertainment that are similar to that. Donnie Darko, a much smaller, not as broadly seen movie, but it covers a lot of, and these are not Christian movies per se, probably very few are. Well, what do you mean by Christian movie? Because it's made by a Christian, same thing goes for music, doesn't make it Christian music or Christian movie. Just because it has the right words about God in it doesn't make it Christian, so I don't even know what that word means, that phrase, so do with it what you will. But Donnie Darko, very blatant issues of, is there a God? Is life predestined? Is it scripted out? Do I have a choice? What are the implications of my choices? Inception, and Being John Malkovich. They look at what is the nature of consciousness, the soul, the mind. What is me? What am I? What is a person? You can't watch those movies and leave them and not think about, similar to Matrix, I wonder, I mean, that could be plausibly true. So what is reality? The Matrix, metaphysics, what is reality? Fight Club, existentialism, my personal experiences are supreme. One of the observations that the main character, Tyler Durden, makes at the beginning, his life is empty, so he starts joining self-help groups. And at first they fill this need he has, until he becomes addicted to self-help groups. He goes to more and more self-help groups. He makes this observation that self-help can just be another addiction that alone offers no hope. And that starts off the whole premise of the movie. Well, he's starting with the assumption that this doesn't bring hope, and it's the thing that we all look to, that's the trendy thing to look to get hope. If your life is messed up, well, you need some form of self-help to recover from this or that. Well, if those don't offer hope, what does? Is there hope to be found anywhere? And where is that? How can that be found? Another issue he brings up is materialism. The things you own end up owning you. We were raised to believe we would all be rock stars, millionaires, and movie gods, but we won't. And he stops right there, and he doesn't go any farther. Okay, well, what now? His worldview doesn't offer anything on that. It's a very destructive worldview if you've watched the whole movie. But our worldview does. Yeah, we won't grow up to be those things, but that's not the pinnacle. That's not what we're all climbing for. So what is it that we're placing our hope in, that we're seeking? Devil's Advocate, a very dark movie, but it shows the natural outworkings, what will happen if you live a life consistently in opposition to God. It's a dark movie because it's showing what will happen if you live a godless lifestyle. It's a very honest movie in that sense. Memento, if you've seen that, it brings up issues of identity. What is identity? Who am I? If I can't remember who I am or any of my memories, then what am I? Is there anything more to me if that's gone? If you've seen Braveheart, it's all about virtue. Shawshank Redemption and Dead Poet Society. You know, these big movies that have all these big issues. Schindler's List. What's really important in life? You can't watch Schindler's List and walk away and take life lightly. Truman Show. What is reality? Groundhog Day is funny. It's a lighthearted kind of it's a comedy, but it's become kind of a underground philosophy kind of movie where what is the meaning of life? Do we have personal responsibility? He starts out, he's reliving this day over and over. He starts out just doing what he wants to do. But pretty soon, it's like, well, no, I can't do that. I can't take advantage of other people. Once he gets the idea that he's going to live this day over and over and there's no implications, no consequences, why not do whatever he wants to do? Why not go on and live life how he wants? But he doesn't. He goes and he decides, I can't live that way for myself or for others. There are implications to how you live, and I do have a duty to live a certain way. Why? Where does that come from? What's that?
He finds there's no satisfaction in what he did.
Absolutely.
He doesn't gain anything.
Yeah. Why? And that's a great conversation. You know, and beyond just going to work the next day, yeah, that was a good movie, which is a phrase we say for about every movie, regardless of genre or whatever. You know, 3 stars, 5 stars, whatever. Why? But to go the next step, well, why was that a good movie? Or why would he live a life that way? There are conversations that aren't often had, I don't think. They're very, I think, interesting and productive conversations. Blade Runner, Count of Monte Cristo, Bicentennial Man, Batman Begins. Lots of good stuff. Anything else come to mind? Thoughts, questions?
Maybe we should all go see the new Batman movie in a couple weeks.
Actually, what he did, where this film and theology started out, what he would do, their church would get a fairly new film. It wasn't, the first weekend it's out, but it's only been out a few weeks. And they will play it in the church building. And they'd have hundreds come. And they would watch it together, unedited. So I'm not sure what the rules were and how they picked a movie. But they watch movies like District 9, which has got some things you wouldn't think when you play in church. But they would watch this movie. He'd get on stage and lead a discussion with 300 people. What was this about? What were the big issues? And that's where his videos and the things he puts online came out of. I thought that would be a really cool thing to do. Not in the same way, I'm sure, but I don't know how you do that. There's a group that used to meet, not here, that would go the next morning after Lost was on every episode. They would, hash up the philosophical issues raised and religious, things that were brought up. What's that?
If we get to the end and find there's no point.
Yeah, right. Just 4 years of my life for a church that makes no sense. Which is kind of realistic, actually. You can see that church in many places right now. All right. That's it. Thanks for coming. Grab some cards.